Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the SHAIR Podcast. And today we have Erica Barnett joining us on the show. And Erica tried everything to stop drinking. Detox after detox, treatment center after treatment center. She continued to find herself in a state of relapse. Stating that rock bottom is a lie, Erica believes that it is always possible to go lower than your lowest point. Tumultuous relationships and empty vodka bottles hid throughout her apartment defined her life, acting as both her tormentors and closest friends. Today, Erica Barnett is a veteran Seattle-based reporter covering politics, housing, homeless, and addiction for a variety of local and national publications, as well as her own website. And she is the author of Quitter, a memoir of drinking, relapse, and recovery. But before we dive into this week's episode of the SHAIR Podcast, make sure you click subscribe to the SHAIR Podcast YouTube channel. Visit the SHAIR Podcast website to learn more about the SHAIR Recovery Community, the SRC, and visit omarpinto.com to learn more about one-on-one coaching with me. So without further ado, let's dive into this week's episode with Erica C. Barnett. Hey, Erica, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Omar.
I am excited to have you on the show today. How you feeling?
Pretty good. It's 75 here in Seattle. It's gorgeous. So I'm feeling pretty good despite being locked in.
So that's actually one of my first questions, but we'll get there in a minute. So first of all, let me just introduce you. So today we have Erica Barnett joining us on the show. And Erica is the author of Quitter, a memoir of drinking, relapse, and recovery. Her book, Quitter, rejects the comforting notion that recovery is a straight line from addiction to rock bottom to sobriety. For Erica, it took countless steps forward and setbacks, including more relapses than she can count, in order to reach a state that feels like recovery. Along the way, she lost her job, her friends, the trust of her family, and very nearly her life. Sound about right, Erica?
That sounds about right.
I hit that right? All right, nailed it. All right, sweet.
The book has a happy ending, but we'll get to that.
All right. I love happy endings.
That sounds so grim, and I swear it gets better.
All right. So Seattle, California. I am originally from California, so
Nice.
love it. Yes, I'm from Los Angeles.
Oh, okay. I love LA.
Yeah. So so tell us a little bit about, what is going on the West Coast for you guys, because I know that quarantine, like some of my friends are in San Francisco. You're much further up north.
Yeah.
Is it similar? What's that look like for you guys? What has that done for your normal daily routine?
Well, honestly, I mean, so it hit here first, and I think that we went on lockdown a little bit after San Francisco did, but it felt when we first went on lockdown, which was like mid-March, I want to say, I had a little bit of a meltdown, like when it became official. I was just, I don't know. It felt like, well, kind of like it does now. It felt like it was never going to end. And it just felt really real. But right now, I mean, I would say, like, I live on a busy street. I'm looking out the window and there are no cars on the road. There's nobody on the street. It's totally locked down. Everybody wears masks everywhere. Social distancing is really, really heavily kind of peer enforced. So it's weird. I mean, I work from home, so my routine hasn't actually changed that much. But, like there's Zoom meetings now, which I am not the biggest fan of, because I just interact with people better one-on-one and in person. So that's taken some getting used to. But I mean, honestly, I make my own routine anyway. So it hasn't been like that seismic of a shift. And I don't have kids, it's not, it's much easier for me than a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, everyone's got their own adjustment period. Everyone is dealing with it a little bit differently. So as far as, I have a belief that this is a cosmic wake-up call for the human race. So what's your take so far on this epidemic or this pandemic?
Well, I want to just kind of frame it in terms of recovery, which because that has been such an interesting phenomenon that I've witnessed. I know a lot of people, and I've read so many stories about people relapsing and people struggling with their own recovery, or or using more, drinking more. Um, what I have found, and what I found talking to other people in recovery, that's really interesting is that like I feel more motivated to help people, and I feel, and I know a lot of people in recovery feel more motivated. I mean, I've talked to people who've said, usually I'm really depressed and it's hard to get up in the morning. And, sometimes I struggle with that. But a lot of people, and myself included, I think are feeling like, you know, we have it pretty good. I mean, I'm very comfortable in my recovery at this point. Not to say that I, feel complacent or think that I couldn't relapse again, or that it couldn't happen to me. But I also just have like a real sympathy for people who are struggling, and I want to help more than I think I was aware of wanting to help before all of this happened. So that's kind of the positive. I mean, it's I don't know if this is going to be a seismic shift in the whole world. I would love for it to be, because a lot of the stuff that I write about in my day-to-day life, like homelessness, is really at the fore right now. I mean, in Seattle, and I think this is true all up and down the West Coast, there's so many people on the streets living in tents. Shelters are closed, shelters are spaced out, and it's just really in our faces. So my hope is that, and I don't know if this answers your question, but my hope is that, we are going to kind of wake up and say what we were doing before wasn't working. I try to look at the positive in it, because we're all stuck at home no matter what. So I think it's best to kind of focus outward and try to help people, for those of us that have the privilege and the ability to do that.
I totally agree, which is why I ask, right? I love getting people's perspective right now. I think it's super important to really to hear what other people have to say, right? In the sense of having gratitude, an opportunity to help more people, to be of greater service, to have the time to be more of service, which is going outward. But it's also a time to go in. I mean, if you think about just the opportunity that this virus has given us all to spend more time with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go inward. You can do the things that you said you never had time. I don't have time to meditate. I don't have time to self-care. I don't have time for me. I don't have there's all this stuff where I don't have time. You look outside your window and you got nothing but time.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, when I first kind of had my little meltdown, I mean, I think it was because of fear. I think I was kind of I was possessed by this thought that, like, because I'm a freelancer, and I just thought, oh my God, like I'm never going to get another job. I'm going to be in poverty. I mean, I don't know if you're probably familiar with CBT, but like, it's that,
Yes.
like, what's the worst that can happen? Like, oh my God, you catastrophize. And that was where I was for, like, I don't know, a day. I mean, it really didn't last that long, because then you're right. Like I just sort of started forcing myself to do things like write down gratitude lists,
Mm-hmm.
like take a really long walk, which I never did. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I've lived in this neighborhood where I live now for like 4 years, and there's a park across the street. I never go to it, and so I've been doing that. I take an hour walk every day. It really has, like, kind of caused me, I mean, like everybody, I'm taking up baking. It's like it's caused me to do all these things that that I didn't think I had time for before. And, like, of course I did, but now that we're sort of forced to either drive ourselves crazy or figure out something to do, that's really been an awesome opportunity. But it took me a minute to get past that fear of, like, I'm going to be homeless tomorrow.
So many reminiscent stories, and I had my meltdown too, when it became real, right? When the airports got shut down, when the the NBA shut down, when all of a sudden the world started shutting down. I think we all had our moment of that spiritual awakening of, like, this is not a joke. Like, this is real. This is serious. Like, whoa. And then when that passes and the new normal sits in.
Yeah.
you recognize that for the first time in my history, we're all on the same boat here on the planet right now. We're all in the same boat. We all have the same thoughts, same fears, same uncertainty. But at the same time, it also forces you to look at this idea of change, right? Like, we're so uncomfortable with change no matter what it is, right? Oh my God, I can't believe it takes an hour to drive across town. It used to only take 15 minutes, right? Like, the new norm is it takes an hour to drive across town, right? And after a while, you stop complaining about it, and then it just becomes a part of the new normal. I think what it's teaching us is that there's always going to be new normals. There's always going to be change in your life, and the quicker that you can adjust to it and embrace it and allow, the quicker you can get into whatever new normal has presented itself. And so, speaking of new normals, one of my questions is about your spiritual condition. How has that been affected or changed or been enhanced since this happened?
Yeah, I mean that's such a complicated question, and I'm not like I'm a very material person. I'm not someone who goes to church or has like I don't have formal spiritual practices. I'll be honest with you. Like the main thing I do. Can we swear on this podcast, or do you want me
Fuck
to keep
yeah.
it clean? Okay. So the main thing I do, and the first thing my sponsor taught me, or one of the first things she taught me, before we even started doing the steps, was to pray for people that I hated. And at the time, like, I mean, honestly, like, I can say I don't think I hate anybody anymore. But at the beginning, I had a list, right? And so she said, okay, so I'm going to teach you your first prayer. And that prayer is, hey, God, that fucker? I'm praying for him. And I was like, seriously? That's all I have to do? She's like, yeah, you don't even have to say his name, like, at first. Now you're going to get to the point where you say his name. And I hate to tell you this, you're going to get to the point where you have to make amends to that person. But for right now, just say, hey, God, that fucker? I'm praying for him. And that was that's how I learned how to pray. And it's, and I still have those fuckers in my life, from time to time, where I'm just, like, that's all I can do. That's all I can manage is say, God, that fucker, I'm praying for him. But what has happened, during this pandemic is I'm sort of finding more people to pray for that I haven't, I wouldn't necessarily have thought of before. And like, I mean, I'll give you an example. Just yesterday, I have a neighbor who has been driving me absolutely crazy, just because she's doing all this improvement in the yard and wants me to move my stuff around. And I'm like, well, I own the yard too. And, it's just like typical conflict, but it's heightened right now because we're all indoors and we're all just kind of, trying to get by. And so yesterday, my sponsor said, well, you got to pray for her. And I said, you know what? I think I can even name her in my prayer. I'm not that mad. So seriously. I mean, and so like I said, I don't have a formal practice. I'm not good at meditating. I mean, walking right now, that is the best I can do, is just, walk for an hour and not think about work, and not think about what I'm mad about or what I'm stressed out about. But I do say those little prayers throughout the day for people, both people that I am annoyed with, but also, people that I love and am worried about. And like I was saying before, I mean, this has kind of, while it does turn one inward, it also kind of turns you outward. Especially, as I said, I mean, there's just so many people who have it so much worse than you or I right now. So mostly it has turned me outward toward other people more.
Which is, connection is such an important aspect of spirituality. And if you can get behind the idea that we're all connected and that we're all one, then you can quickly start to create your own definition for what spirituality is or means in your life. And so for many, it's the idea of being connected, right? And even when you're praying for that fucker, you're connected to them in that moment.
Yeah. And in a much better way than I
Yeah.
was 2 seconds before, when I was just like, living in my resentment.
Yep.
And
Eating that poison.
exactly. And and it really, I don't know, it does help me. And I, to everything being connected. I mean, it's funny. I was just thinking about this question before we talked, and like, my boyfriend makes fun of me for this, but like, because I tell him I believe in vibes, which is
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm picking like kind of a like ridiculous way of putting it on purpose because I know it annoys him, but I do believe that we get back from the world what we put into it to some extent. And so, like, especially now, I mean, I'm trying to write as much as I can about the people who really need help a lot more than I do.
Mm.
Um, because right now, I mean, people are coming together, but people are also being really divided. And I think that a lot of people who have a lot are, not really seeing the big picture and are getting annoyed by tents in the park and, having to see people visibly suffering on the street, because usually those people are swept away, and that's just not happening now. So, yeah, it's the same situation in LA, San Francisco. So I'm really have made a choice to focus on those people, during this time of pandemic and in my own work.
Okay, so let's start diving into Erica's story a little bit. So my first question, as we start to unwrap this episode, is about when you first started drinking and using. So, what was that experience like? How old were you the first time you drank or used drugs, and more importantly, how did it make you feel?
Yeah, I was about 13 and when I first drank, and it made me, it's interesting, and I talk about this in the book. I didn't particularly like drinking when I started drinking, and I have kind of a strange drinking journey, and that was my drug of choice for most of my life. But I started doing LSD, which was like, I don't know how old you are, but I'm 42. That was really big in the early 90s in
I'm
Texas
49.
anyway. Okay. Well, that was my drug, and I loved it, and I would do it all the time, and I mean, and school was boring, like, and it made things interesting, and it made me laugh, and it was just fun. And so I really didn't drink for very long once I discovered like psychedelics. And then in high school, I met a guy, and he was straight edge. And so I became straight edge because I was like a joiner, I guess, or a follower. And I didn't drink or do drugs through the rest of high school, pretty much at all through college. I think I ate some pot brownies once. But I was really, really kind of, obsessive about grades, obsessive about exercising. I mean, I just threw all that kind of compulsive energy into other places. And I didn't really drink heavily. I mean, I was the kind of person who would literally, like, after I turned 21 and was going to political events and stuff, I would like get a glass of wine and dump it out into the nearest potted plant, so people would think I was drinking and being cool, but I didn't have to like get drunk because I hated it.
Interesting.
And yeah, and so this is part of why I think when I started really drinking in my late 20s, I thought it was impossible for me to have a drinking problem because I hated drinking. Like, why would I have a drinking problem? I didn't drink for so long. And then, I came out here to Seattle from Texas, and I started working at a job where everybody drank all the time. That was just kind of like during the day, at lunch, whatever. And I was working it was an alt weekly here in town. And I felt really uncool around all those cool people. And so I think drinking, like a lot of people's stories, I mean, it made me feel like I fit in. And then it was just kind of off and rolling. And I mean, my like sort of major drinking journey took about 10 years, from really starting to drink, every night, every other night, to drinking all day, every day. And, I was one of those low bottom drunks by the end, like very, very low bottom. And so drinking made me feel like I fit in. And then it felt like it was the only way to feel comfortable in my skin. And that happened very quickly, like within a year or two.
So interesting. So at first, you have this psychedelic experience and you love that.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm always trying to find an excuse, and I never have. So, and I never will probably, but I mean, but if I could, that would be my drug of choice if it, wouldn't have, rotted my brain by now, probably at the rate I was going. But yeah. And then I
Yeah.
just kind of stopped that.
So it's interesting. So you didn't like the drinking. We're doing the straight edge thing. And you weren't interested in it at the time. You hated getting drunk. So you'd had an experience with getting drunk at some point early on.
Not even, it's actually not even getting drunk. You
didn't like the buzz.
Yeah. When I was like 14, I mean, my best friend and I would drink a lot, just kind of at her house in the summer. We were latchkey kids. There was never anybody around, but I didn't love it. And then when I was like an adult and trying to be a professional and trying to kind of, everybody I worked with was much, much older than me. I was like, I think when I got my first job, I was 19, my first full-time job, maybe 20. And I didn't want to be out of control. I was so scared of not always being on my game. So yeah, I totally rejected it at first.
Was there a moment where you thought to yourself, you'd had a couple of drinks and it was like, oh man, I think I feel it now. I think I feel what everyone's talking about. Or was it always shitty?
No, there was definitely, I can't pinpoint a moment, but I know it was when I was working at the last alt weekly job I had, and probably, we would go out after work. And I do remember one time I was very, very uncomfortable at an after work gathering. I mean, I just started and like, I didn't know anybody, and I'm not good in groups, especially when I don't know anyone. And I was like, oh my God, like, I'm embarrassing myself. I'm so boring. Like, my interests are so boring. And then like, probably like 3 beers in, I started feeling like people were liking me. And it wasn't even that like I felt super comfortable with myself, but people seemed to be reacting to me in a different way. And I was like, oh, so this changes my personality. So it was always about me and how people would perceive me. And I thought this makes my personality better somehow.
Well, it seems like it's a constant, this need of approval.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I am uncomfortable in my own skin. We had that conversation right at the beginning, right before we launched the Zoom call.
I hate Zoom calls. Oh my God.
Why?
Because you have to look at yourself. Oh man, it's so hard. It's so hard.
I said, see, now you're forced. People are now forced to look at themselves.
I know. I hate it so much. I hate having my picture taken, like, which is funny because like I am like a very vain person, probably because of all that, but it, yeah, I still feel a little uncomfortable in my skin. Not so much as I did even like 4 years ago. I've been sober for a little under 5.5 years. So, it took some time to feel comfortable, even like just having this conversation and talking about myself this much in this way. I would never have been comfortable like right when I first got sober and I was feeling really raw,
So you just celebrated 5 years.
Yeah.
When?
February. God, I always get this wrong. February 6th.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I love the 5-year mark.
Yeah, it came at such a weird time.
Totally.
Because, like, everything was like about to just kind of all fall apart. But
you missed it. If your anniversary was February 6th, then it hadn't
I just missed it.
Yeah.
We had our first case in Seattle on February 29th.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Did you do anything like to celebrate your 5-year?
Not really.
Did it come and go?
It just kind of came and went. I mean, I have been so like scared by all the people who are like, oh, well, 5 years, you don't even know yourself until after 5 years, and everybody falls off at 5 years, and like you start getting
Oh,
hyper confident and blah, blah,
God.
blah. So I was like scared shitless. Right. And so I didn't do anything. I mean, I barely told anybody. I think I put up a Facebook post, which was like the most that I've done in terms of like publicly celebrating sobriety, because I'm a very superstitious person too. So like I don't want to jinx anything. I don't want to be overconfident. But it's a cool milestone. I'm very proud of it. But
Did
now I'm working toward
anything,
10.
yeah, exactly. Like you won't even think about 6, 7, 8 until you hit 10. 10's another huge, beautiful milestone. But did anything, it could have come right, like it may or may not have because of the coronavirus, but it just felt so different when I celebrated 5 years. I felt different. Did
Hmm.
you feel different?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel, I guess, maybe this is like too much AA indoctrination and like to just going to too many groups that tell you too many different things. But I guess I felt a little more like I have standing to talk about certain things that I didn't
Mm.
quite have standing to talk about before. Like I still feel like I'm a newcomer. But at the same time, I also just feel more confident saying, here's something that I've learned, and I learned it, and then I kept learning it, and it stayed true for long enough that I'm confident saying this will work if you try it. So I feel more confident when people ask me, how do I stop drinking, or do I have a drinking problem, or what do you think I should do if I want to find out if I have a drinking problem? I feel like I can say, okay, here are 5 suggestions. I'm not saying you have to do this, but these are suggestions and they work for me. So that's something that's new, and that has come since right around 5 years.
Well, I would say that you're definitely not a newcomer after 5 years in recovery, right? And that probably lifted a while ago, right? And so and one of the reasons why, um, like I credit, like, no question about it, and NA saved my life. Like that's the fellowship that saved me. And I spent a lot of years and a lot of time, working the steps and sponsoring other guys and being of service and really, diving 100% all in into 12-step recovery. But after a while, you realize that people walk on eggshells all the fucking time, man. Like
Hmm.
there's like, careful. It's always careful. Careful now.
Yeah.
Careful. Careful. Like, what the fuck, man? And so I get so when the dogma comes in, and especially when the dogma comes in, and then with the eggshell walking comes in, whereas at some point it's like, dude, you just celebrated 5 years, right? Celebrate, enjoy
Yeah.
it. Just like
Yeah.
dive. Not only that, it's what people want to see. Like, I'm dragging my ass into a meeting with, few days of sobriety, and somebody is celebrating 5 years. My life is fucking amazing. You're like, huh, I got something to look forward to here.
Oh man, that was not what I thought with a few days though. I thought these fuckers are lying.
Okay, fair
Like
enough.
that is what
Okay.
I thought. And now on this side, I mean that was not your main point, but it's so funny. When I walked in, I was just like, you're lying and you're lying and you're crazy and you're in a cult. And I mean, and I should say, like, I mean, and my book talks about this too. Like, I tried absolutely everything. Um, and I mean, like everything that there is out there. Like, I don't know, I didn't do ayahuasca. I mean, I'm sure there are some things that don't work that people try for recovery that I didn't try first. But I got sober in AA. I don't, I don't go to meetings right now, but it definitely, I think, for people who are super fucked up in their lives and need some structure and need a place to just go during the day, it's really helpful. And it was helpful for me. But what I talk about in the book is there are so many other paths to recovery that work for people, and some of them are, moderation management works for some people. I mean, there's no fucking way it would have worked for me because I
No.
couldn't moderate past 9 a.m. you know
Yeah, I
but
don't, I have no idea what that even, like, that seems like, wow.
I know the concept. Well, my partner, I mean, he can drink like, I know if he's been, oh God, he'll kill me if he hears this, but he won't. But like, I know if he's been drinking when we're talking on the phone right now, cause he gets kind of slurry after like half a beer. And he doesn't like that feeling. So he'll just like, put it back in the fridge and have it tomorrow. And I like just the concept. I mean, I'm like, are you like a human being? Are we different species? I don't get it. I don't get it. But some people, some people can do it.
Yeah, we're not those people.
Yeah, we're not those people.
All right, so Erica, let's go there. So there is this 10-year period of time where you start your drinking and then you end your drinking, right? And you talk about all these different pathways. So take us through that last, right when you realized I need to do something different because my life is a complete disaster, and you start trying stuff.
Well, I started trying stuff in 2008, and I don't think I believed my life was a disaster at that point. I thought I need a fresh start, or just a hard stop is the way I conceptualized it. So I went to Detox, and I thought, like, well, first of all, I went to a detox that was nothing like any other detox I went to later. So it totally spoiled me on what detox was like, because it was like my own room. I had room service. I had a TV. I remember I was watching the Democratic National Convention that year, and like, I was like, this is fine. Like, I'll be fine. And I got out, and within 3 months I was drinking again, of course. And so that very quickly, progressed. And I mean, I tried moderation therapy. So I had a therapist who was going to teach me how to moderate. I tried cognitive behavioral therapy. I went to a non-12-step, non-spiritual based recovery program. I went to Detox a ton of times. That's not really trying something, that's just saving your life. But that was like such a huge part of it. I went to treatment. I went to inpatient treatment a couple times. I went to outpatient treatment a few times. And that was all over the course of like 6 years. So that was from 2008 to 2014. And ultimately, I learned something out of all of those experiences. I learned that I couldn't moderate. And I learned that, one of the pieces of advice somebody gave me, or one of the suggestions somebody gave me very early on, like right when I first started, trying to quit, was, okay, so you think you may not have a drinking problem. So just quit for 6 months and see how that goes. And I mean, I didn't even hear that. That was like buzzing. What? Like, that's not, what are you talking about? Nobody can quit for 6 months. Like, that's impossible. And so I ignored that. But, I learned that I couldn't moderate. I learned a lot of tools in cognitive behavioral therapy, which I think AA is a very disorganized form of CBT over a long period of time, done by total non-professionals. But I really do. I mean, what is it? It's like, you're questioning yourself, you're questioning your thoughts, you're talking back. Yeah. I mean, you're thinking about the ramifications of your actions. You're thinking before you act. Anyway, so I learned a lot from that. I learned a lot from going to treatment twice. And I would say actually the second time I went to treatment was amazing. It was at a place outside Seattle that was like, not like the first place I went to treatment was kind of fancy. I mean, it wasn't like California fancy, it wasn't Malibu or Promises or something.
Dude.
But yeah, I've heard horrible things about those places.
Anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, so it wasn't, I mean, it was like middle of the road, but it was all women, and it was very small. It was like 12 people. And I honestly didn't get a lot out of it. I thought I was getting a lot out of it, but I didn't. And the second time I was this huge place, totally overcrowded, just shithole. And I met people that were worse off than I was, which I didn't think existed at the time. Like, I thought, well, I'm the worst there can be. And, my best friend at the time said, you're the worst alcoholic I've ever met in my life. And I was like, well, that's it. I'm the worst alcoholic. And I met people who were way worse off, and like people who had like organs replaced, and, a guy who was wheeled in with jaundice and had to like leave and died. I mean, one of the girls that was there when I was there left and OD'd immediately and died. And she was like 19. And so that was like, you know, even though I didn't get sober after that, I relapsed pretty quickly. I really, really took a lot away from that experience. Just realizing like, no, it can always get worse. And like, you think you've hit rock bottom, but you haven't yet. Um, and, um, and the thing that, you know, but that didn't make me quit. I mean, you know, it just kind of gave me some more tools that I could use when I eventually did quit, which was a few months later. And, and by that point, I mean, like my life had been chaos for like years at that point. And I got fired. I got fired from my job, after passing out in the bathroom twice, which is like the kind of thing
Dude,
that like
that's the worst.
you and I can laugh about,
worst.
right? I know. And here's the thing, like, so I came in, this happened, so I passed out in the bathroom,
Dude.
and then they told me to go home and not come back until, you know, whatever, just don't come back. And I came back the next day and I did it again, the exact same fucking thing.
The next day?
Next day.
Oh.
Yes. And like, and that sounds like, and that would be such a sad and pathetic story. And it is, but for the fact that like, that had to, I mean, truly believe like that or something like that had to happen. And that's not what got me sober. I mean, they fired me the next Monday, which was not something that I could even conceive of because I've never lost a job and I got fired. Like that is, you know, that's not something that happens to me, is what I thought. Like people like me, you know, that no. So I drank for a long time after that, for months. And, you know, I mean, my world was like the 10 by 10 square foot, you know, room that I was staying in. And, you know, I'd get up, I'd go to the store, I'd get booze, I'd come home, I'd pass out, I'd get up in the afternoon, do the same thing, try to eat something, and just every day, you know. And I mean, I had the DTs, I had hallucinations, I had like just everything you can imagine, just kind of the worst alcoholic that you read about in a book like The Lost Weekend. You know, I really identified with that. But what my, you know, I didn't have a wake up call, but my wake up day was just one day in February of 2015. I got up and I was just like, I can't do it. But also, I mean, I thought that before because I knew I couldn't. I knew I was going to die. It was like, I can't and I won't. And so I got up and I, you know, went and got my like morning wine, which I, you know, had to drink every day. And
wait a minute, your morning
wine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm like,
no lines for me.
Okay. I'm like, okay. I hadn't even entered the picture.
No. I tried that like twice and I hated it.
No, I loved it. Right,
I think there are two different types of people here.
Totally.
Like opiates too. I'm like, that stuff makes me sick, which I'm grateful for. But yeah, so while I was drinking, I called around to detoxes, and I got into one like right away that I had just been to, maybe a month and a half before. And I was so broke. I wrote a check to the cabbie because my credit cards didn't work. And so I like wrote him an actual physical check that was like post dated for when my severance pay would come in. And, you know, and he was so pissed at me, and I tipped him, you know, like a third or something. I mean, you know, but I was like, I don't know, maybe this check's going to bounce, but I have to get out of this car. And so I got out and I went into, this mental hospital, it's also a detox, and stayed there for 5 days. And I came out, and that was it. And it was just, it was like, you know, that moment of clarity just happened, and I don't know why. Like there's no precipitating event.
Oh, there's a tremendous.
Or there were like hundreds of them.
Yeah, I was like, oh, there's no precipitating event. Really?
But
I don't know what your definition is. I don't know about what waking up in a bathroom twice.
But I mean, but it was months. I mean, you know, it just went on and on. It just went on and on. And I just think like, I don't know, like one of the kind of messages of my book is that your rock bottom might not be dramatic. you know, it might not be, hopefully it's not like what mine was like, because mine was horrible and I don't wish it on anybody, but like, it might also be that like you just wake up one day after, you know, 500 bad things have happened and nothing as bad is happening right then, but you just realize you can't go through with it again, you know? And that's what happened to me.
So, you know, I can't help you thinking about what you said here. I can't and I won't. Right? Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
Those are okay. So, was that a thought?
Not at the time. I think that's just what I thought of to describe it now. I mean, it was more like, actually the thought was I'm done. And I actually believed myself for once.
Is there a point in that moment or in that time where you physically or mentally ask for help?
Yes, all the time. I mean, do you mean
And I'm not talking about going to detox or calling
yeah.
a friend. I am talking about being so lonely, so desperate, so tired that you literally look up and go, I just can't, I can't do this anymore. I can't live this way one more day.
I did that every day. I mean, for so long, I would just say, like, God, help, please lift this from me. Just lift it from me. And then I would go out and do it all over again, you know? Um, yeah, I did it all the time. But you know, I mean, you're not going to have, like, things don't just get lifted from you. You know, you have to do a little work of your
No,
own
you
too.
have to take the next indicated action. And for
Yes.
you, it was to call a detox.
And I think, yes, and that is that willingness part. I had the will, I guess, but I didn't have the willingness. And so I think I was just hoping for one day to wake up and not need it anymore, which is, you know, I mean, which is not medically indicated. I mean, I would have died if I had just quit, and I couldn't have physically just quit. I mean, I was at the point where I couldn't do that. So yeah, so the next indicated step was, okay, and now we're going to go to detox. And then after that, we're not going to drink the next day. And then after that, we're not going to drink the day after that. And for me, it was also like literally like just going to meetings all day for a little bit, because I didn't have a job.
Right.
I
That
needed
was
to
the next
be
step.
somewhere. Yeah.
So the first step was the recognition. The step after that was get into detox. And the step after that was, I'm just going to have to go to meetings whether I like it or not every day.
Yep. And I hated it.
Okay. This is great.
Yeah.
This is great because we've all gotten the call and we've all asked for help in that space, of true surrender, where you say, you know, God, please help me, but I don't do shit.
Yeah.
Okay. The next day I go right back out. But then all of a sudden I find myself going, you know what? I'm willing to do whatever it takes. And you do the things that you don't want to do that are uncomfortable. But little by little, things get better. The days get better. And so I'm assuming that you got yourself a sponsor and you started working the steps, or did you resist that for a while?
Well, I had a sponsor before I went into treatment. But what happened was, I ditched that sponsor about, I don't know, maybe 6 months into sobriety. And because it just wasn't working for me. And she had a very like, well, I'll tell you what happened. My best friend and I, who has like been the most supportive person, and I dedicated the book to him. He is the most supportive person in my life, you know, outside of my parents, who have also been really supportive. But we were hanging out at a bar, and one of the things that, you know, that I think it's in the big book, you know, we can go wherever normal people can go as long as we have a reason to be there, right? And we're like sitting there and we're watching, I think it was like the presidential debates or something. I can't remember. It was some political something or other. And we're like laughing, and I'm having my, you know, my soda, and he's having his whatever. And my sponsor walked by, and we're sitting by the windows, and she took a picture of me and she sent it to me. And she said something like, you know, I can't remember what it was, something related to the steps, you know, nice work on your second step or something, or just something super sarcastic and bitchy. And And I was like, I'm sitting in a bar and I don't want to drink. And I'm with my best friend who talks to me again, who like had given up all hope on me. And we're having this great time. And all you can see is an alcoholic sitting in a bar. Um, and, not to mention like, get out of my life. Like you don't have the right to spy on me and take pictures of me and harass me. So anyway, so I ditched her. I got a new sponsor. Sponsor said, "Are you willing to go to any lengths?" I said, "Sure." And then she started taking me through this really brutal process that was called the steps. But like, she's very old school. She has like 30 years of sobriety, and she put me through it, man. I mean, we got through those steps fast. I got through my 4th step in 2 weeks. She said, if you can't do it in 2 weeks, you need a different sponsor. And I was like, okay, this is an assignment and I'm going to do it. And I did.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So
Yeah.
it was the big book intensive.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I know. I've been through that one.
Big time. Yeah.
It's intense. It's intense.
Yeah.
But it does move. It does move quick.
It moved quick.
Yeah. And it's nice because when you get through it, you do have some tools, and you can use them, right? Yeah. And you can actually start helping other people. So.
And I didn't feel like she was invading my privacy in the way, it's just, I felt a lot more comfortable, like just saying like, okay, this is the process and we're going to plug into the process. And like, for me, that just made me more comfortable because it's like, everybody does it this way, or, tons and tons of people have done it this way before. We're just going to do it. We'll see how it goes. If it doesn't work for you, find somebody else. And, and it would have been no hard feelings. So, so it worked for me for whatever reason. Maybe I just like getting instructions and trying to get an A on the test, but but I did.
But the idea of wearing recovery like a loose garment, that was always a favorite expression for me. Mm-hmm. And it felt like that sponsor, that's exactly how she viewed recovery as well. You wear it like a loose garment, and allow the process, right? Mm-hmm. There's going to be bumps on the road. You're going to make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. Right. And you have to allow for that. Right.
Yeah. And she's very into like, nobody's perfect. Take what you like. Is that
take what you need, take what you like, take what you need and leave the rest.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's one of my favorites. So there's a big part of, and I remember reading somewhere about homelessness. Was there a time when you were homelessness? I mean, were you homeless, or are you advocating for the homeless?
I would say, well, so I'm a journalist / advocate. I never became homeless, but I think the reason that, but that is like entirely because like I said, I have supportive parents. I had an eviction notice on my door. And when I went to treatment, the first time, I think, my parents had to pay my rent 1 month, and that is not, we're all like very, I'm groomed in self-sufficiency. I really believe in it. It's just like part of my bones, mm-hmm. because of the way I was raised, for me. But they helped me out. And so I didn't become homeless. And I don't think that is very likely to ever happen. But it makes me have this profound empathy for people who, for whom $1,000, which is what my parents gave me, if without that $1,000, you'd be homeless. And I see, and like so much of the homelessness that goes on in Seattle and in rich places like this is just because people don't have enough money. But a lot of it is also addiction. And I know that addiction, can feel totally impossible. And especially, and that was for me, like with a tremendous amount of resources. And like, I had health insurance. I've never not had health insurance in my life. So I could go to Detox. I got in a shit ton of debt because I was going to the emergency room all the time. But like, I had access to treatment. And there are just some people that don't have that. And the only reason that they're on the street and I'm not is because I have access. And that's just, that's luck. That's not like superiority or I did a better job in life. It's just, I live a very privileged life, and I just really try to be aware of that all the time. And that's kind of why, my career took this step after I got fired. This is what I decided, after a couple of years to write about pretty much full time.
Okay. So that is what you write about.
I write about the city of Seattle. So I write about like politics and, and city issues generally, but mostly homelessness, especially right now. Mostly homelessness and addiction. I mean, I write a lot about addiction as well. Oh, you froze for a second.
Oh, you're back.
Oh, there you
I
are.
can't tell if it was you or me.
You froze for a second too, so I think it might have been the call.
Okay.
Can you
All
hear
right.
me?
So yeah, no, we're fine. We're back and we're
Awesome.
recording, so we're good. And I'll edit this. Hold on. Let me write
Cool.
this on. 48 minutes. Okay. No, you were saying that this is what I asked you, oh, this is what you write about. And you were saying, oh, I write about the city of Seattle. You write about
Yeah, I
politics.
write
So
about
go
the
ahead.
city. Yeah, I write about the city. I write about politics, but mostly I write about homelessness and addiction. So I've been doing a lot of national coverage during the pandemic, especially about homelessness and what the homelessness crisis looks like in the middle of this pandemic, as well as what addiction looks like and what recovery looks like, and just all of those things that are of really direct interest to me because I could have been there. I could have been homeless, but I'm not. And so I have the ability to tell other people's stories about it.
Well, I mean, first of all, how awesome is it that you're able to recognize what you feel is your passion and your purpose and maybe even your civic duty, right? To help people that are not in the same position that you are, that are not privileged. And so, like, how cool is it that you actually are able to write about what it is that you want to write about, and the stories that you want people to know about? Like, there's things that I'm sure you want people to know about the homelessness and about what's going on in Seattle, even in your own hometown.
Mm-hmm.
So it's gotta feel like such a blessing that you're able to do that.
Well, what's so cool about it, and this is like one of those gifts of recovery, I think, is that, like, so I lost my job, right? And I had totally thought that my value was my job and that I was my job, because I'd always, I'd sort of followed this one path through my whole life, and I decided I was going to be a journalist, and I was going to be a certain kind of journalist, and I had to take these certain steps to get there, and I took those steps, and everything was sort of along this pre-planned trajectory, and everything always worked out for me. And then I had this huge setback, and I had to really reassess my own value, and I had to reassess my values too. Like, what is it that's important to me? And so when I was sober but didn't have a job, it gave me a little space to assess, what do I want to do with my life now, and also to think for the first time, like, I can do anything with my life, and I don't have to follow this exact trajectory. And so what I ended up doing was starting a website and asking for money through Patreon and slowly building that up. And then eventually, I had a job at a nonprofit for a little while, which was wonderful. And that allowed me to kind of do this journalism thing on the side, and then build it up to the point where I was able to quit my job and just do this full time. And
That's incredible.
It's crazy, right?
Incredible.
I mean,
like, I'm blown away. I'm like, wow, cool is that?
Yeah, I mean, it took a lot of work.
No, of course.
And a fair amount of luck too, and also just, I've been in Seattle for a really long time, so I have a certain amount of goodwill in the community, and people that were like really rooting for me even though they didn't know me, and so that helps. But it might not have worked out, and if it hadn't worked out, like, it wouldn't have been the end of the world. And that's kind of what I realized, is like the end of the world happened, which is that I lost my job, and it wasn't the end of the world. And so, like, kind of nothing is the end of the world is what I realized. And so that gave me this confidence to be able to say, okay, I'm just going to try to do this. And if it doesn't work out, I'll get a job at Target, I mean, I don't have pride about that kind of stuff. So, and that was kind of the worst that could happen. It's like, well, maybe I'll have to get a job at Target. I mean, that's fine. I like people,
Brilliant. What an appropriate statement for where we're at today, right? That whole belief system around it's not the end of the world, or
yeah, I mean, we're in the middle of the end of the world,
right?
And yet we're all like still going on with our lives somehow.
Right. Like, as you were saying, I'm like, wow, what an appropriate statement for this time. because it's happening. It's
Yeah, it's
absolutely,
happening.
it's the end of the world, but like, it's not,
We
it's
still
just
wake up every morning. You
yep.
have to do something,
Mhm. It's not the end of the world. It's a new normal.
Yeah.
That's all. It's all it is.
Yeah.
That's
And
the
hopefully
only,
we'll get, I mean, I had a trip planned like right in the middle of all this. Man, was I pissed. That was another thing that I had to learn to accept. I mean, talk about acceptance. I was like, this whole big trip, I was going to see my college friend. It's like, okay, well, you know what? Didn't happen. You lived through that. Like, get over it. Get over yourself. Move on.
no. Yeah, we've all had to, my dear.
Yeah. And it's hard to get over
And
yourself,
yeah, it is. So, of all the things that you have done, have tried, have experienced when it comes to recovery, what role does community and connection play in your road to recovery?
Well, I think, like I said, I don't do a lot of AA stuff, and I'm not like in the fellowship, quote unquote. So, for me, I think community has been more about surrounding myself with the people that make me feel fed and make me feel good. And I mean, one of the things that happened when I quit my last job was I lost all my friends, my quote unquote friends. This was before everything, before like back in the mid 2000s. When I left that job, all my friends that I'd been drinking with and that I thought, liked me so much, they like literally overnight vanished, never talked to any of them again. And I thought some of these people were my best friends. And I think, especially right now when we're all locked down, and kind of you get to sort of pick who you are communicating with more. Um, I have really tried to think, who makes me feel fed and like, like they're contributing, we're contributing to each other's betterment, and who makes me feel like shit, and just kind of weeding out the people that make me feel bad. Which can be really hard to do, especially when you're just kind of maintaining from day to day, and you don't want to rock the boat, um, and you don't want to offend anybody. But I think having a little bit of time and some perspective has made me realize, like, okay, there are people that not like that I need to cut out of my life in any dramatic fashion, but maybe surround myself more with people that make me feel good. And that's that's a big part of my recovery, is just not saying like, well, this person seems to like me, so I guess I have to like them back, because then I can collect more people that like me. Which I think is how I thought before, and one of the reasons I didn't have like a lot of confidence in myself, because it was that middle school thing of just wanting everybody to like you.
Eh, so perfect. And I'm glad I asked the question, because so many things evolved from me asking that question. The first one was, well, I don't go to 12-step meetings. As if when we talk about in recovery, community and connection, the only thing that qualifies as community and connection is going to meetings.
Yeah.
Right. Which is completely not true. Right. And so, and the reason why I brought it up too is because when you were talking about all the things that you tried out, it was that place that was that shitty, I don't even know, shitty rehab
Yeah.
or
I'm not going to
detox
name it, but I loved it.
no, yeah, no. But what I'm saying is the emphasis was on the people.
Mm-hmm.
And you just mentioned that, well, I don't mind working at Target, I love people. So, when I asked you the question too, it was like, I had to focus on weeding out the people that were not good for me. Which means when we talk about values and we talk about setting and recognizing values, it also allows us to recognize our value. And when we talk about, weeding out people that are not good for us, it's about setting boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
So what's important for me is to be around people that believe the same things that I do, that have the same values that I do, that feed me so that I can feed them.
Yeah, one of the things that I was just thinking while you're talking about that is, one of the things that I heard in early recovery from a lot of people was, stay away. You're gonna have to lose all your old friends, and that is so not true to my experience. Because I mean, my friends were desperate for me to get sober, like they wanted me back, and so like I don't think I lost, I mean, before, 2014 to now, I mean, I have not lost a single friend, and I have not cut anybody who was there for me during that time out of my life, even though honestly, I don't have any close sober friends except my sponsor. Um, and, uh, and it doesn't matter because, that's not what makes us friends. We connect over something that's different than, we both don't drink. I mean, I don't have the same hobbies as most of my friends. I don't have the same interests as a lot of my friends. But the connection is deeper, and I mean, it's just so funny. Like my bestie, Josh, was so desperate for me to clean up my act, and he had no idea what to do. And I thought, oh man, like I thought I had alienated him so much that I had lost him. I mean, truly, I was like, well, that's it. Like, I'm going to have to find all new friends now. But the truth was that the problem was not me, it was my behavior. And once, I fixed my behavior and made some amends and like proved that I was still the person I used to be, I mean, all my friends came back. So, I mean, I have an amazing community now. It's just, it's not the community that you might think about when you think about what people in AA do. So yeah, I mean, I'm super grateful for that.
I think it's very important. I have a community called the SRC, the SHAIR Recovery Community, and it's a small paid membership community, and it's only about recovery. So it's non-denominational, right? And so really I emphasize removing dogma and any sort of prejudice towards any sort of recovery pathway. So it could be a Buddhist pathway, it could be a yoga pathway, it could be some meditation pathway, it could be a 12-step pathway, it could be anything, right? But really it's more of having an opportunity to connect with people that are like-minded. And so generally the topics of conversation are more in the neighborhood of where are you at today? How can we help you and how can we support you? And so I think that's what's so important is that element of when you first come into any space, we can even use 12 steps too. It's like, hey man, you're safe here, right? Like just keep coming back, right? We can help you. And so that's the element that works. Like there's a proven program here. There's people that have been where you have been, right? There's experience, strength, and hope here. It's just that when, for example, the idea of, I can only get community and connection in my 12-step fellowship if I'm a recovering alcoholic or addict, it starts to feel like I'm trapped. And so, yeah, I definitely like to ask that question and expand on it because connection is everywhere. And you're sometimes you're surrounded by that guy or that girl, and sometimes you are that guy and that girl. And so, and really it's your behavior once that changes that allows you to reintegrate back with your friends. But then again, there's plenty of us like me that none of the people that I knew when I was drinking and using stayed in my life. It was just two completely different lifestyles and two different people.
And I think what happened for me, the reason that wasn't the case is I went through that period of drinking with people, and then I became a solitary drinker. And so it didn't matter. I mean, there was no like fake community, real community, friends, anything. I mean, all my friends were just people who wanted me to get better. And I was locking myself up and drinking all day and not talking to anybody and avoiding people. So like one of the gifts was, bringing all those people back into my life, and it did involve making amends to some people.
I'm sure.
Which, which is hard which is really hard at first. And then it becomes like really natural, which is another bizarre thing about, practicing stuff like that.
Yeah. It's such a blessing. It's so healing. So how far along into recovery did you decide to write this book? And tell us a little bit about why the name Quitter and really what's the message that you want to get across with the book?
Yeah. So it was pretty early on. I would say, within the first 2 years, I decided to write it. And Writing a book takes a lot longer than I thought, because I thought, you write it and you turn it in and that's the bulk of the work, and it's totally not. But what I wanted to talk about, well, first of all, the original title that I sold it under was Shit Faced. And then I decided that I couldn't live up to that and that my parents would murder me. So, and again, I'm 42 years old, and yet I was like, oh God. And I have told them that. And I'm like, I know that every other word is fuck, but just be glad it's not called shit faced. Okay. Um, so,
So good. So good.
It's called Quitter because, that was my story. I mean, I quit over and over and over again. And I was always quitting. I mean, and I'm talking specifically about drinking. I mean, I didn't quit at anything else in life. But I got really good at quitting, and most of my, I guess, lessons that I learned, or most of my tools that I gained, were through that process of quitting over and over again. So I think there is a narrative that you go through a recovery arc that looks like this. You start drinking, it's good for a while, then it turns bad, then you hit rock bottom, then you have a moment of clarity, and then you recover and everything is roses and angels and whatever. Um, and that's not my story, and I don't think it's most people's story. It's not the story of a lot of people I know who are in recovery.
No.
And this concept of time, I mean, this concept that I have 5 years and 3 months and so many days, like that. I mean, it can be very useful for some people, and I am proud of my time, but at the same time, if I relapse tomorrow, I wouldn't lose that time. And so I think that can be really toxic and really discouraging. And so for me, relapsing was so much part of the story, because if I hadn't gone through everything I went through, I don't think I would be where I am. And so, my hope is that people will read it and feel a little bit more hope if they are trying to recover, or if they are trying to help someone who's struggling, that, that it's not the end of the story if you relapse. It's just a part of the story. And so I'm kind of hoping to bring that new narrative into the mainstream a little bit more.
Yeah. And I don't even know if that narrative is like people need to believe that. I think it's more of recognizing that it's certainly a part of the process for so many, and it's nothing to look down on yourself about, because you've had relapse after relapse after relapse, and you've completely lost hope in yourself. Like, I think that that's really the key element in here, is that being in recovery for so many years, you come across people that they've just lost hope, right? They just like, I don't think I can do this, right? I just keep relapsing, and I can't seem to get it right. I can't seem to figure this out, right? And it could just be as simple as, I'm just being way too hard on myself. Have these unrealistic expectations, like you wrote here, right? Yeah, these unrealistic expectations about myself, about recovery, about relapse, about alcohol, about alcoholism. And, I create the story in my head. And when I come to the conclusion that, man, you know what? I think I'm just hopeless, right? Sometimes you need to hear how many times other people have failed and relapsed. And know, you know what? There is still hope. And also, the story doesn't change much, folks. I mean, I've interviewed a lot of people over 5 years, and the story isn't very different right there at the end. Sometimes it's a massive rock bottom moment. Sometimes I don't recognize my rock bottom moment because I've been living it for 10 years. And so sometimes it's just this idea that comes into your head that says, I just can't do this anymore. And I'm going to have to do the things that I have refused to do or are uncomfortable. And it was detox, and it was eventually working a 12-step program. And it was a ton of other things. It was CBT, and it was, cryotherapy, and it was all these different things that I had to try and do. But at some point, there is a short list of things that are the next
logical, the next logical step for you to go from hopeless to hopeful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also not thinking of it as I have to. I mean, this is the essence of one day at a time, right? So I'm not saying anything particularly profound, but also just thinking I don't have to do it all at once. Like I don't have to make everything better all at once. I don't have to get out of debt all at once. I don't have to like make all my friends back and make everybody trust me. I mean, I remember when I was like, I don't know, maybe 2 months sober, my friend and I were walking down the street and I was acting like really hyper. And he kind of gave me that look, because he would just always do this. He could like just tell. He could just tell. I mean, if I'd had just a little bit of drinking, and he's like, "You sure you haven't had anything to drink?" And I was so pissed. I mean, I could not believe the gall after all I had done, and I was working so hard. And how dare he? So anyway, we worked it out and it was fine. And I was like, okay, look, I haven't been drinking. You don't have to believe me. I understand why you don't believe me. It's fine. I don't need you to believe me right now. And I had to earn that trust back, and that takes time, and you can't expect it all to happen at once. And if you do, it's like looking at all the food you have to eat in your entire life in a big pile and thinking like, how am I even going to start this? I mean, that's a gross metaphor, but you know what I mean?
That's a great metaphor. That is a great metaphor. Holy shit. Literally, right? Like yeah, it's like eating an elephant. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, man.
Yeah.
And it's so true. Like I run into cases all the time where, you got some time under your belt, whatever that is, and you're expecting, the Macy's Day Parade, and you're expecting everyone to just like, oh my God, it's so amazing that you're sober now. You're waiting for all these accolades. And somebody actually goes, hey, you sure you're all right? I mean, you haven't been drinking or anything? And all this, oh my God, how dare you, right? Don't listen, let me be the first and let Eric be the second. Don't be an asshole. Don't be an asshole. You've been fucking up for years. Nobody trusts you. All it takes is for you to wear the wrong socks one day. And people to go, whoa, you all right?
You relapsed?
Yeah, right? Yeah. And not only that, like this is an opportunity even to have the conversation where it's like, you're not mad at them. Trust me when I tell you, you are not mad at them. If you stop for a moment, you ask yourself, what am I really upset at? Or who am I really upset at? It's me.
Yeah, because I lost that trust. I did that.
I did that, right? I'm mad at me. And then if I go another layer deeper, which I hate going deeper than that because I love staying angry. Angry gives me strength and power. But really, it's just so sad.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have disappointed myself and I've disappointed all my friends over and over and over again. And this is a reminder of how disappointing my life has been for so many years. And that's what we don't want to feel.
Sometimes you need those reminders.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I've made amends to people and they've been like, cool, fuck you, get out of my face.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily say like, I am making an amends to you and here's what I would like to say, but sometimes it's like, hey, I'm really sorry about whatever it was. And they're like, why are you talking to me?
Yep.
Like, I don't want to see you. And it's like, yeah, that's legit.
That is legit.
I played my part in that.
And that's when you know that you've done the work with somebody else because you're prepared for that. You're prepared to get, dished out some nasty stuff. But at the end of the day, most of the amends that you make are super healing, not just for you, but for the other person.
Mm-hmm.
And the level of accountability that emerges from finishing a 9th step is super powerful.
I haven't finished mine yet. Let's be clear.
Okay. All right.
I had to write down the people that I'm never going to make amends to, people that I might make amends to, and the people that I'm definitely going to. And then I think I had to pick one off of each list and start with those. So yeah, it's It's a long list. It's a really long list. And some of them, I don't know where they are, but I'm picking away at it.
Okay. All right. All right. So I'm going to start asking you the closing questions for the podcast. All right. And my first closing question is, what is or what was your biggest limiting belief?
My biggest limiting belief was probably that I am my job. I identified with my job so much that I thought that if I lost it, I would lose myself.
Wow.
And that was absolutely false. But it's the thing that was actually, I mean, besides all the addiction, besides everything else, it was the thing that was holding me back the most.
So what is it that you believe today?
I believe that I am not my job, first of all, and that I have value regardless of my status with other people, regardless of whether people like me, because a lot of people don't like me. I mean, as I get, more of a presence in the world, boy, people who have no idea who the fuck I am, like, just think I suck. So I am really learning to just deal with that and say I have value no matter what anybody else thinks of me and no matter what my professional status is, just because I am a human being and I have worth.
Absolutely beautiful. That's what everyone should believe. That's what everyone can believe, is that it doesn't matter what anybody thinks. You have value. And the thing is that you forget about the value you bring to so many because you allow the haters to drag you down. And, I remember listening to this a long time ago before I got, deeper into celebrity status, which was, you haven't really made it until you got haters. That's when you know you made it, right? And I heard that before I even started getting haters, right? And so when they started coming, I was prepared, right? I was like, what is this? Oh my God, why would you write something like that? Like, oh. And, and then that little voice would come up and it would say, you haven't quite made it yet until you got haters. And I'm like, I guess I've made it. There is a possibility and opportunity to reframe everything. But I really love the idea of having the belief system that no matter what, because I'm a human being, because I was born, I have value and I have worth. And that's it. Right? That's what I believe today. And that's powerful, because when I'm not concerned with what other people think of me, that is freedom.
Yeah.
That is freedom to create. That is freedom to stand up for yourself, freedom to believe, freedom to hope. It's wonderful. So, bravo. I love that answer. Okay, so let's talk about a burning boat moment. All right. Tell us about a time when you made the decision that you were no longer going to tolerate this. You were no longer tolerate something in your life. Not one more day, not one more hour, not one more minute. I will no longer tolerate this in my life. You burned the boats.
Oh boy, you're gonna have to give me a second to think of a new answer on this one.
Did you already give the answer?
I think I already did.
Which one?
And I think that was when I ditched my sponsor. But yeah, I mean, that was, I burned that. Although, we're friendly now, so that all worked out. I think, you can edit out this silence, I hope.
Of course. It could just be that sponsor story.
I mean, I think it might be. That's the one that comes to mind the most. I mean, obviously, I had the moment where I decided that I couldn't tolerate my life as it was, as someone who drank every day. But I do think, like, and I've certainly cut toxic people out of my life, but I do think that was actually the moment where I was like, okay, I'm prepared to actually go through some kind of process, but not this one. And this is just going to bring me down. It's not going to make me drink, because I didn't feel like drinking over it, but I did feel like this is a toxic relationship that makes me angry every time I think about it. And that's not what a relationship with anybody should be like. And, you know, I mean, I've struggled with that question a little bit because I feel like I have, you know, in terms of just cutting toxic people out of my life, I've been really fortunate because I haven't had that many. And the ones that I did have in my life, like I said, I kind of lost them all because I quit a job and then all of a sudden they weren't there anymore. So that's why I struggle with the question a bit, because I do think it makes me immediately think about like, what toxic people have I cut out of my life? Because otherwise, I mean, I don't know. I feel like, you know, I have made really considered decisions since I got sober, and I think most of them have worked out pretty well, even though they haven't always been the right decisions. And I also feel like, you know, I'm not a big believer in everything happens for a reason, because I don't think that it does. But I think you can find meaning out of everything that happens. And I think you can absolutely, like, I was reading this, this great profile of Val Kilmer, and he has this wild belief system where he doesn't believe in like medicine or science. And he thinks that, you know, he had I don't know if you read this thing, but he had cancer, and he says it because he's a Christian Scientist. He didn't have cancer. He just had the idea of cancer. Anyway, but they were talking, anyway, the writer was talking about what a great way to live that must be. Just, you know, everything happens for a reason and everything is good. And like, I'm not there, but I do think you can, and I don't want to be there because I think that's a naive way to go through the world. But I do think you can find meaning in things, and you can make meaning in things. And so I try to do that as much as I can. So when I'm making bad decisions, which I still do, I try to find the meaning in them and find how they've gotten me to the next step. That's, you know, that's maybe a good decision or that's a better outcome. So,
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. No, and I think that Val Kilmer, you know, just listening to that statement, it's probably, you know, he credits it to his religion, but he's probably done plenty of peyote and psilocybin and, you know,
he
ayahuasca.
Though. He hates
bullshit.
Drugs. Oh,
bullshit.
I know. He played Jim Morrison.
Yeah, exactly.
But you need to read this article. I'm not going to go on and on about it, but you got to look it up. It's so good. It's so good. It made me so happy.
Did you ever have any of those moments when you were doing LSD where it just felt like you had the answers?
Oh yeah, all the time. The problem is I could never remember them. I'm being totally serious. Like,
I am believing you. That's what's so funny.
That's what it felt like. It was like, oh my God, I figured out like the answer to everything in the universe.
Yes.
But then it's like, yeah, you can't articulate it at the moment, and you can't write anything down because it fucks you up so bad. I mean, it's a very like powerful drug, right?
It is.
And I mean, you kind of sometimes you can't really speak. And yeah, and then the next day you're like, man, I had some really profound thoughts. I mean, I guess stoners have that too, but I just always wanted the thing that would like blow my mind open. So yeah, all the time. I mean, like I said, I mean, I'm not an anti-drug person either, to be honest, like for other people.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I think there's some wisdom that people get out of that stuff. And I'm definitely not going to deny that, even though I don't think Val Kilmer did peyote.
I don't know, man. Like he was brilliant. I can't even think about Jim Morrison. And
I can't even picture him.
I can't
without seeing Val Kilmer.
I can't. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Okay. So, you know, it was just, I'm choosing not to buy it, but anyway, God bless him. All right. So tell me about an aha moment when you realized you were turning it all around.
I think, you know, when I decided to quit my job,
mm-hmm.
I think because that was a choice I was making, and because my last job had ended when I got fired, and I think I realized that I wasn't scared, and that was a really big step, because there were actually people in my life saying, this is a bad idea. What you're doing is a bad idea. You know, I didn't have any savings, but I paid off all my debt. And I had put myself in a place where I felt like, you know, it was not safe by any means, but I felt okay being like a little unsafe about some choices at that point, because like I said, Target's always there.
So
But
good.
like, but yeah, I mean, I think at that point I realized like, and I was going in a different direction. I wasn't getting a job in a newspaper. I wasn't doing something where that seemed safe. Although now, I mean, look at newspapers. I mean, they're the place where I worked before this. Went out of business. The place I worked before that is laying people off. So I didn't go the safe route, and I felt like, okay, this is not going to drive me into relapse. This is not going to drive me down the road to, homelessness or whatever the worst case scenario is. So I think that was a really big moment when I said, you know what, I'm safe without this job.
I'm going to trust myself.
Yeah. And I did. And
So
I trusted
beautiful.
myself to try. I didn't trust myself to succeed, because you can't ever, that's never up to you entirely.
It's never up to you, period.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of stuff is random. Like I
Yeah.
got a book deal. Like I didn't think that was going to happen as quickly as it did. So yeah, that was but that was a point where I was just like, okay, I'm just going to jump and see what happens.
Beautiful.
And I felt safe doing that.
Love it. Love it. So if our listeners want to reach out to you, if they want to get your book, what's the easiest way to do all that?
Well, you can find me on Amazon, obviously. If you want to go to bookshelf.com, I think it's .com, that is a good place to order from your local indie bookstore, especially right now, since you probably can't go there in person yet. And you can also find me at Erica C. Barnett on Twitter, and I'm on there all day. And there are also links to buy the book on my Twitter bio. And I'm also on Instagram, where I mostly post about baking and friendly geese that I find in my neighborhood. So it's like a split personality. Just depends on which one you like.
And do you have a website?
Yeah, it's thecisforcrank.com.
C-is-for-crank.com.
The C is for crank. Yep.
The C-is-for-crank.com. Okay. All of this will be listed on the show notes. Okay. It's for easy access, folks. All right. 2 more questions, Erica. What is the best suggestion you have ever received?
Well, I mean, so this is not a recovery suggestion, but it's from my dad, who suggested that I stop avoiding my debts. And I mean, this is like a really practical suggestion, but it was the thing that I think set me on the road to being able to make a lot of these decisions that led me where I am now. So that's one, like, stop avoiding your debts. If a lot of people who are in recovery, in early recovery, have a lot of debts. I know I did. I had about $30,000, and I tackled them all. I called all the people that I owed money to, which was really hard and really humiliating. And then I got out of debt. The other I mentioned earlier, but I think it's worth repeating with a little more detail. Somebody told me to try quitting for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about that is that I think a lot of people can do that. I think a lot of people who are, substance use disorders, it's a whole spectrum. And some people are on the opposite end of the spectrum that I was on. So for me, that was like an insane suggestion, because I couldn't quit for one day. I mean, I probably could have white knuckled it through a week, but that's it. But for other people, maybe they quit for 6 months and they feel so much better, they just stop. And so it wasn't entirely a sarcastic suggestion on his part. It was just like, it had a certain effect on me, and it would have a different effect on somebody else. So I thought that was a really good suggestion from that person. And I think if people are struggling, but they don't know if they have a problem or not, I think that is a really good thing to try.
Yeah, I think just purely from the recovery spectrum and purely from being an alcoholic, somebody telling you, why don't you try quitting for 6 months, is like, why don't you try joining the NBA?
Yeah. Okay. Or like, why don't you try breathing underwater?
Right. It's like the most, I don't even understand why I came here. Like, are you speaking Chinese? It's so unfathomable, because you're not there to figure out how to quit drinking. Right. Yeah. You're there, in hopes that they're going to fix you somehow, or they're going to provide you with all the answers. Right. And, well, if you don't have a problem, I quit for 6 months. You're like, what does that mean? So yeah, it totally makes sense. Right. Like, why don't you try, and so here's the caveat to that, right? If you're listening to this and somebody says to you, well, well, maybe you should try quitting for 6 months. And if you're able to quit for 6 months, maybe you're not an alcoholic. Instead of getting angry going, yeah, I can't do that. So yeah, you're right. I'm probably an alcoholic. Like sometimes you just have to embrace the obvious.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, and I should have at the time, but I just got pissed off. I was like,
Well,
okay, you're deliberately not helping me.
I would have been pissed off. Everybody I know, would have been pissed off. Right. But, embrace the obvious. Okay. What is one final parting piece of wisdom you'd like to share with our listeners?
I mean, I'm going to go back to the idea that relapse is part of the journey for a lot of people. You don't have to relapse. As they say in AA, you don't have to drink even if you want to. But if you do, it's not the end of the story. And people who are really hopeless can recover. Like I was absolutely without hope. And I thought I was going to die. And then I didn't. And then I recovered. So I guess, my message would just be, if you relapse, you're not a failure. You just aren't to the point that you're going to get to yet.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Erica, what an absolutely amazing episode. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
This was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
All right, folks, we've now reached the end of our show. Thanks for joining us. And as we say here in Costa Rica, pura vida.
Pura vida.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of the SHAIR Podcast. And be sure to click subscribe to the SHAIR Podcast YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, on all the major social media platforms. Go to our website, the SHAIR Podcast. Go to my website, omarpinto.com. Find out about joining the SRC, the SHAIR Recovery Community, or one-on-one coaching with me by setting up a free consultation. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next week on the following SHAIR Podcast episode.